I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everybody? Andrew Cleary from the F1 podcast here with Jonathan Ricci. Unfortunately, Erica can't make it this weekend, but that is okay. We are recording season 5, episode 13 on the back of the Canadian Grand Prix, where, yes, we had our boy Johnny corresponding live from the hairpin section. John, first and foremost, it looks like Canada has been officially extended to 2035. All the concerns that we discussed about in last week's episode sounds like they've been addressed, but to be honest with you, how was your weekend in Montreal? What was the fan experience like compared to last year? Just I would love to hear your breakdown of what went on.
Yeah, like we're recording this, I guess, is it Tuesday,
Yeah.
July 17th? So I got home last night. So just, taking it all in as the fourth Grand Prix that I've attended at Circuit de Villeneuve. Um, there was a lot of what is going to happen this weekend. We all know what happened in 2024 in terms of the rain. We were pretty blessed with good weather throughout the weekend. So I think that also played a good factor why everybody was in good spirits. Um, I think first and foremost, I think from an event management perspective, those that like, if you go into the hairpin, you're pretty much going to stay in the hairpin. It's very hard to really go, let's say, if you want to go to the hairpin and maybe go to turn one or two, you're looking at like a long commute just to get there. And there's no real shuttles unless you have like a paddock ticket or something on the boats or the golf carts. Having said that, um, I think there were definitely some infrastructural improvements, more water stations I noticed, more urinals. Some of them did not really have the hand sanitizer out in the open, so it kind of felt weird. You got out and you're like, okay, I can't really clean my hands. Fortunate enough, I had hand sanitizer. None of us say less. I think better food options in our area. However, I think the problem with the circuit is you're pretty much exposed to the sun, so you're pretty much out in the open. So you just kind of have to like make do or fine. And that I think that is probably one criticism I would have. I think overall, getting into the track every day was pretty smooth. They, when you got off the metro, there was definitely huge lines, but they had the lines where you kept moving. You never really stopped. So I think from a management or people's movement management or event planning, the psychological aspect of like, okay, I'm always moving. I'm always moving. Because the minute you stand still, then you feel antsy, you get annoyed. But I think overall, yes, like every day it did get more busier, and race day was the busiest, like 30 minutes before trying to get food or a drink. Good luck. But I think that's just normal. Um, but clearly, that it was such a good weekend that the Montreal Grand Prix is staying on the F1 calendar until at least 2035. And the news was announced today. Octon Racing Group, the Canadian Grand Prix promoter, which is owned by Bell, and various government officials announced a 4-year contract extension with F1 on Tuesday. And as you know, the previous deal ran through 2031. They extended the agreement. Also, for those that don't remember, 2020 and 2021, it canceled. Um, Having said that, now that the Canadian Grand Prix is going to be in May. So that has posed some
End
good.
of May, though.
Well, it all depends. I think it's the Honda, not the Honda Indy, the Indy 500 that it might have to compete with. So there could be some movements where it's after the long weekend or 2 weeks after the long weekend. So I think every year it's going to be different. I think if I read correctly, the officials have pledged 117 million over 4 years as part of the contract with Liberty Media. I think spoiler, alert, I'll just be very honest. I've seen a lot on Reddit. Ticket prices are up. I've seen some areas up 21%. We can get that into another episode. But like,
Also, the merchandise prices were
yeah,
ridiculously
you don't buy
stupid this
merchandise.
weekend.
You do not buy merchandise. I'm telling this right now. You do not buy it at the track. You buy it beforehand for significant. I saw like some jackets going for like 300 and something dollars.
US. Like
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. I mean, like I heard like polos, like your Ferrari polo would have been like 300 US at, at Montreal, like which you completely get, supply and demand, right, with
Oh
regards
yeah.
to, but that being said, it's insanely stupid to have three like $300 shirts at a for a brand. Like that's ridiculous, but
Yeah, I
nevertheless.
saw hats going for like 100 something. I think Kim Illman always does a great video of highlighting what the food prices or the merchandise is. And so I definitely highly go do that. Speaking about Kim Illman, I obviously thank you for signing my book. You can't obviously see it in this video, but that is good. Having said that, I think we got to talk about the weekend.
Yes.
There was a lot of stories going into this weekend. So one, you had Lance Stroll, whether if he was going to race or not. You had the McLarens that were, I think it was 10 points going into the weekend on a track like Circuit de Villeneuve. They probably were the favorite ones. However, with the heat, I think that also played a bit of a factor. We saw a couple of moments in FP1, FP2, and FP3. Charles running into
Oh,
9 laps in, major crash. You had Lewis Hamilton spin in the hairpin. Franco Colapinto turned two on this flying lap. Kimi went wide on lap six. A lot of, I think, drivers really struggled because I don't think they realize how fast this track is.
well, also there wasn't a lot of fresh rubber laid down until thank God the Academy was there this weekend to help lay down the rubber to help pick up speed. But yeah, it was pretty. It was like an ice rink out there. No pun intended. For the first practice session, even like seeing Leclerc go into the barrier, right? Had to do a full chassis change, which like apparently is like an 8+ hour job. And the rule is you can't, if you do a chassis change, you can't race, you can't, continue racing that same day. So
Yeah.
that's why he missed FP2 in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And then you even saw Lance Stroll in FP2 hitting the wall on turn seven. And it was like a minor hit, but it still like had a lot of damage. And they told him that they couldn't box the car, that he had to pull over in terms of safety. But yeah, and even like it was weird because the McLarens in practice did not look good. They looked like they were potentially challenged. And then, I don't know if we want to go into qualifying, but yeah, like
But yeah.
it made qualifying exciting because you had an F qualifying three in the final qualification, at least like 5 or 6 drivers that could have easily got pole.
hmm Yeah. And which like it was a typical George Russell qualifying performance where he just kind of hung around, didn't really do much, and then bam, all of a sudden his final lap just sets an absolute banger to qualify. I think it was 2 tenths ahead of Verstappen in that regards, and a couple extra tenths ahead, whereas a couple extra tenths ahead of Piastri. It was honestly like I find Canada, like Monaco, Q3 performances are a lot of fun because the track picks up a ton of speed. I mean, from Q1 to Q3, the lap setting time I believe was like 2 seconds faster or close. Like it was in the 112s in Q1 and it got to like the 110s in Q3. So that track is really picking up a lot of rubber being laid off. And like to be honest with you, that just makes it so much more exciting, especially at a track like Montreal. Um, I honestly can watch drivers race around that track all day.
Yeah.
Ton of chicanes, a lot of fun turns, especially the hairpin, right? The hairpin is an unbelievable turn to have. Wall of Champions, I mean, apparently Danica Patrick thought it's not very technical, which Nico Rosberg completely slapped, said, no, 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 it's very hard compared to what you think, but no, it's fun to watch a really great qualifying experience or just performance, even on TV. So I can only imagine what it's like live in that
And
regards.
even in that case, because like look at Lando Norris. A good example was in qualifying, like in Q3, is he did not time his run perfectly, and then lost any momentum that he had with his tires or his battery, and then he ends up basically P7, and like he knew that moment that it's like
Did you hear his like race engineer on did you hear Will Joseph on like the radio saying, okay, remember your brake balances, remember to adjust those like he was like a toddler in that case. But yeah, Lando having just a non-great qualifying, which was, and then Oscar was a little struggling too. So for the longest time, you're thinking, oh my God, Max is going to start on pole again. He's going to win another Canadian Grand Prix. And then all of a sudden, George Russell says, hello, and boom,
Yeah, and
pole.
like I also we need to give kudos to Kimi Antonelli. We'll talk a little bit about him and his Sunday. But yeah, he's setting P4 at the age of 18. Fernando Alonso, a lot of credit has to be given to him,
Yeah.
like the way that he was giving that car. It's interesting because there's an individual behind me that was taking photos throughout with a professional camera. And we could talk about like in the race. And I got worried that I think that Fernando Alonso was using his tires too hard because he took photos within like the first 12 laps and you already saw the degradation on
Oh no, like a
Alonso's
little grading on the
tires.
tire.
And I was
Oh
like, oh no,
boy.
is he already using up all the tire management already? But yeah, we could talk more about Sunday though. Yeah, let's just go through it. Yeah, top
Well,
10
so
George.
first and
Oh yeah.
foremost, fun stat: the 6 times that Russell and Verstappen had shared the front row together at a Grand Prix, Verstappen either starting pole or P2 was 6-0
Yeah.
against Russell. So going into Saturday, you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen again. Russell's going to like maybe lose it turn one, turn two. But no, really fast off the line compared to Verstappen, and Russell just took right advantage of that into turn one.
Yeah, and Oscar did not have a great start as well, and Kimi and Antonelli just went right in the first corner. But yeah, it was just like really exciting to see George, finally get that monkey off his back. Because especially, I think it was last year too, if I can remember correctly, that he also struggled against Verstappen, and it was interesting because like you had a mix of strategies going on. Ferrari, for example, they thought they were doing a one strategy, and then turns out to the two strategy. And then unfortunately, I don't know if you heard, but Lewis Hamilton ran over.
A groundhog,
Yeah, and so then his car
which he
got
lost
damaged.
like zero point 0.5 seconds per lap. Like he lost 5/10 because there's a 20-point decrease in his downforce.
Yeah, and then you had
Well, because I'm not lying, Rich. I'm watching this race on TV and I see like a severed body of an animal just sitting on the track, and I'm like, did somebody is like, why is there no car to like pick it up? Is it like a piece of, but nope, I heard it was a groundhog. I was like, oh boy.
yeah, I'm shocked that I don't know if was there a red flag? Like
No, there's like no flags
no,
for it.
no, I was there. I don't remember that red flag. I can tell you about another flag that came out, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Yeah, and then I think overall, you know, it was just
I was surprised about how well it was so hot. Like the track temperature was like 54 degrees Celsius, I believe, or it was around that temp. Ambient air was 29. And traditionally, you see Mercedes compete at tracks that have low air ambient, like a lower
yeah,
ambient
a
temperature and
cooler
lower track
temperature.
temperature. This weekend, like they overcame that obstacle like very well. And I was surprised to see how quickly the degradation on the tires went, which led to people who are on mediums to start pitted early for hards. And I felt the worst for Albon, who was kind of charging through the field with his mediums, but they wanted to do a one-stop strategy, and he got caught in no man's land around lap 2025 when it was like either, well, if you pit for hard, you're going to be P20, but you have to try and last the mediums to when when the next pit stop for everyone goes in. But the problem was it was way too late. He was just getting overtaken like crazy, and he was pissed on the radio.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help that down on the straightaway at the hairpin, like he lost his engine or his brake, and so then that just basically ended his race on lap 46.
Yeah.
And we're like luckily that it was not a major incident, and he was able to go into the runoff there. But you also had Liam Lawson had in lap 53 had some overheating issues, and it's tough because like also you had Lance Stroll, like you would hope like I think it's every he had a stat every Canadian Grand Prix he's participated in, he's gone points and just had a dismal weekend. And I don't think ever since that crash he was not able to respond
No.
to the track or to the circuit or the driver.
Yeah. Like,
There was a couple of I don't want to say blue flags, but there was a couple of DRS trains that really threw off people's strategies. And it's like if you pit, you got to pit before these hairpins. I know Ocon was holding some drivers up at points too. Um, like yeah, Ollie Behrman too, just right out of the points, and then Carlos Sainz getting the only point for
well,
Williams.
if I'm not mistaken, I think Lewis got kind of caught in a DRS train
Yeah,
where when he pitted, he ended up being like 7 seconds behind Lando at that point and kind of got stuck in, again, no man's land, P6, P7 territory, which, again, another questionable strategy
not
call.
only that, and then that he was like, I totally get it. And it's like not only that this Grand Prix was like significant to him is he won this Grand Prix, his first main Grand Prix 2007, but it's just like, hey guys, I'm in no man's land. Like, what's going on? And it was kind of really awkward to see. And
I,
I could only imagine as a driver.
well, and the strategists just blame the car performance as that case. But I mean, you can't just blame the car performance in that sense. You got to do what's best. You got to do everything you can for your driver, despite what's going on inside the cockpit, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, after the pit stop mayhem or the pit stop strategy, we ended up getting a nice tight fought battle in the top five.
Well, yeah, and you had Kimi, you had George, Max, and then you had both the McLarens at one point were competing very much, and like Lando had better pace towards the end of the race, and kept pushing Oscar. And if I can quote a certain media interview, I think Lando Norris was getting interviewed by TSN, and he said, "quote We never said we are going to avoid everything we have been. We have been open about and saying it at some point something is going to happen. It's not an if, and it's a when. And we will see when that time comes."
Well, it was deja vu for a lot of McLaren fans because it was 14 years ago, I want to say, 2011 Canadian Grand Prix. Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton collided off the straight going into turn one, same spot, inside. But, because you saw it from the hairpin, right? Oscar had a little bit of a mistake, which allowed Lando to catch up. So, what was your kind of thought? What was your vantage point from there? How could you see the battle
We
start?
knew that it was coming. We were calling it for 3 laps. The guy behind me, he's just like, Jonathan, it's gonna happen. And he was very determined. He was taking photos, and he's just like, his tires are not looking good towards the end. And yeah, he had a slip up where he didn't take the hairpin, and so that gave Lando the extra speed down the casino straight. And then once they came into the Wall of Champions, then you had that decision where they just collided. And what better way to do that right in front of all the corporate boxes too? So,
The
especially
exact same way that Jensen hit Lewis. Like it was identical. It was so eerie. As like a McLaren fan, you're kind of thinking like, oh my God, this has happened again. And finally, we get some drama in this team. No papaya rules this finally. It's like the first time we've seen an on-track battle of this nature between both Oscar and Lando. And Oscar 1-0. I'll tell you that
yeah.
much because he defended like a lion against Lando and forced Lando into an error. And I thought it was kind of stupid for him to go up the inside like that in that case. I guess like, if you see the gap, go for it. But man, like that is so tight down there that one little mistake is going to cost you a collision. Guess what? It did.
It did, and I can tell you a lot of McLaren fans were eager to get to the door or get out of the stands when that happened. Yeah, and like this is now the conversation. If you're Zach Brown, like, okay, guys, I've let you guys been fighting all season, and I haven't really had to step in, but now like this cost us some much needed points. I think I forget. I have to look at the constructors right now.
Constructors is not a big deal, but
Sorry,
I
I'm at the
mean,
drivers' championship.
it was huge for drivers because when you think about it, Max gained 18 points on Lando in P2, and Oscar gained 25. Oscar gained 12,
Mhm.
and he already had a 10-point lead going in. So this is very much still like to me, we are now at a point. We're almost halfway through the season, right? So Oscar is clearly the number one driver based on what happened this weekend.
Yeah, I think he's been the number one driver for a couple of weeks. Sorry, the fact that he's been able to win multiple races and he's like kept calm and composed when anything has come to him, and it seems that like Lando is
Like good on Lando to go to Oscar after the race in like the post paddock press conferences to say, hey, my apologies, that was my bad. But man, if you're like a Lando fan, this was a tough pill to swallow to watch this weekend because clearly he made it like a costly error.
it was not needed. It was definitely not needed. And that's when maybe a question where Zach Brown says, okay, Lando, I think you have more of the pace. Like go after Kimmy. Like this is like we'll do the switch and you take it out. But like again, you were what how much lap time was left in the race? I think they were only at 90% left.
Yeah. But in my opinion, though, it's like you have to let the guy who's ahead stay be ahead. So you have to let them race at some point. It's on Lando to get around Oscar.
Oh, he's
Being the wily veteran.
lap sip 66. Very
Right,
close to
but
that.
it's on Lando to get around him in that regards, right? When you're fighting like that, and it's just, it, I don't know. I feel like if you're a Lando fan, you're just absolutely infuriated right now because this is supposed to be the guy that's supposed to send McLaren to the product, like to the promised land, right? And then all of a sudden you have little Oscar Piastri coming through who's like, calm, cool, collected, and showing right now that he is a better driver than
Hmm.
Lando in form. And this weekend proved it.
Yeah, and then it's like it's now you're going into a track like Austria, not this week, but the next week, and it's like that is also going to be another competitive track, and you know that the crowd's going to probably be against you because they're going into Red Bull, the Red Bull ring. So how are you going to compete in an environment which is probably not going to be as friendly as maybe Canada was?
But just want to say shout out to my boy Fernando for getting 6 points for the boys this weekend. I mean, he raced a solid race, started
Can
P6,
I be
finished
honest with you,
P7.
Andrew?
Pardon?
Can I be honest with you, Andrew?
For sure.
There was a lot of Aston Martin fans in Montreal.
Yeah. And trust me, those fans, we're gonna see something happen soon. I hope. This year we kind of write it off. Let's write off this year, fans. But next year, when we have Newey's car in play, when we have Fernando Alonso, Verstappen, just putting that out there. Max Verstappen's coming to Aston Martin. Shh. When Aston, in that sense, but I'm very excited. I'm very happy to hear there was a huge Aston Martin contingent. I do feel bad for Stroll. He is obviously racing injured, to be fair. In that case. But the fact that he toughed it out this weekend, give him full props. I want to hear what were your thoughts though overall on Ferrari's performance, aside from the strategy in terms of pace.
Well, I think they looked good in qualifying. I think that was definitely like, okay, there could be a potential that like we could probably, compete here. I think just the Charles like was an issue. And like now, I don't know if you've been hearing this, but apparently the Italian media is starting to get on Fred Vasseur saying that like this is not what we anticipated. You brought Lewis Hamilton in. But it's kind of hard for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I would love to win races. I would love to get more podiums. I'd love us to be more competitive. And like maybe is this a year that we just don't, it doesn't really matter to us, and then we just focus on the
Oh,
2026. But like again, like that is a fair it is a fair kind of question. But again, like knowing the team is the most successful constructors, that is not possible. You need to compete every weekend and you need to do more. So I think something needs to give when it comes to the strategies and figuring it out because again, if Charles was saying, "Hey, let's go on plan C. Why am I pitting so early? My tires weren't the issue here." And it's again, and it's again. How many times we talk about strategy?
I mean, the thing is, they've changed everything there. They've changed the team principal. They've changed the drivers. They've changed the strategists. What's the one thing they haven't really changed, Ricci? The engineers. So I think, and especially when you have, I hope you didn't see the stat. I really hope you didn't see the stat that was posted on our story the other day. Um, we had Ferrari win at Le Mans for the third straight year and makes that 4 wins out of 4 World Endurance Championship races this season compared to 0 in F1. And I mean, I hope you didn't see that stat this week.
Oh, I definitely saw the stat. Like,
Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
do
Okay.
you think
Okay.
I'm not at the track? Like, I'm doing so much B-roll and just seeing you guys, your text messages. I don't know about you. We sent a very nice text message to Erica when we saw that crash.
But honestly, like I, you can't. I don't see like the speculation that they were going to sack Lewis after one season. I think is outlandish, to be honest with you. I get, the media's pissed off, but there has to be some change internally for that really to make a difference at Ferrari. Maybe with next year's regulations, we'll see something like that. But to be honest with you, you've changed everything else but the engineers. So maybe it's the engineers that have to get changed, swapped out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think going to the drawing board, you got to figure it out. Like we're what, 12, 11 races in. We only got what, three podiums for one driver. I mean, give credit where credit's due. Lewis did win a sprint race. We always keep forgetting that, but it will be a long season if we cannot find ways to compete. I know like 2026 will be the year that we all start back to normal in terms of our the regulations. But yeah, it just when you're the most successful constructors team in F1 history, like third place is not enough. Like we gotta figure something out. Yeah, look, I get it. I totally. It reminds me of what, like a couple of years ago when we were you, myself, and Erica, our teams were kind of just in the middle, not really, we're scraping for
Yeah.
points, scraping for podiums.
I mean, at one point, Aston Martin was ahead of both Ferrari and McLaren, like 2023. Just insane
Yeah.
to think. But on top of the race being there this weekend, it was exciting. The F1 Academy came to Montreal. John, you were able to catch up with Nicole Harvda, which was awesome. Great friend of the show. And as we predicted, or what we wished upon in our previous episode, she scored her first points of the season at home.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I think that was definitely a motivation for her for the rest of the season. Keep in mind that normally it would have been two races in Canada, but because the one race in Miami got canceled because of the weather conditions, we got to see three races there. And and I'm going to be very honest. I will give some credit that it was a pretty approachable paddock in the hairpin, so you can go up and see the F1 Academy. So, and it was good that you got to spend some time with some of the drivers, got to see some of the engineers working on it. But yeah, you had some great drives. I know on the Friday. Friday was like pretty exciting. Saturday, Nicole had, she was competing very well, and then had she got clipped in the hairpin. But like, yeah, she got her first points because there was a couple of chaos moments with a couple of the other drivers, and just benefited from penalties, and that's kind of sometimes how it goes. Is you get away from kind of the dog fighting and just hope that there's a screw up and you get your points. But I think overall, I know she probably wanted to get more points this weekend, but I know she was well. There's a lot of cheering for her. We went to an event in Old Montreal with her, and she did a question and answer with some fans, and there's I think about 100 people that were there to see her, and that was really exciting. And I mean, for a Canadian driver to race in the Canadian, Circuit des Juvenile for starters, but in a weekend where you had over 300,000 people throughout, I think the weekend, like definitely incredible. Obviously nerve-wracking, but it was good amount of attendance in all the stands of that. And I think Susie Wolf was definitely very happy with how the races, and I think three different race winners too, really also kind of help the conversations.
What I love what your comment about how accessible it was to be able to gain access to the paddock and talk to the academy drivers. I
Yeah.
think, to be honest with you, that is going to be the key to really growing the academy within F1, and making a greater connection with the fans in that regards. I think that'll be huge for the academy overall, and I like honestly can't wait to watch more academy races as they come down. Next time they're going to be in Zandvoort, so in a couple months.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're gonna have to go, but no, I think that it was definitely like if we can talk like our podcast for a second, like to see when you kind of are sitting there and just point like, hey, I interviewed somebody, I interviewed that person that's now racing. It just to feel that like, and it's like awesome to finally see it in person. And I think that was probably pretty special. And I think for women in motorsport racing, I think it was definitely a big weekend. And, a lot of role models were made this weekend. And, I think kudos to a very incredible weekend. And it also helped the weather obviously played a big factor because, we've seen some qualifications in Montreal where it's pure chaos in terms of the rain.
You have a video on your YouTube channel, right, where you were Lance Stroll was coming through the hairpin and it was just a pure downpour.
pure downpour. My phone had to be put in rice that day. I think I talked about this in the pod. I had to go to 4 different restaurants to get rice, and they were confused why I needed the rice. Um, but yeah, it's and I think like we're hopeful. That's why I'm hopeful that in May, if we're gonna move if the Grand Prix is being moved to May, that the weather can hold up. But I'm probably in Canada, the weather can be 50-50. You don't really know.
It could be snowing that time. You never
I made a comment to
know.
somebody today. I said we might need to get snow tires on some of these cars.
Put
I don't
the
know how that's
chains
gonna
on the
happen.
tires. That would be incredible. Racing tires with chains on them. That'd be hilarious.
I do have a couple of shout outs to give out, if
Oh
that's
yeah, let's do
possible.
it. Like you had a great like it looked like, from what we saw, great fan experiences with the podcast. Like thank you so much for everyone who met with John at the track. But yeah, I will have hear your shout outs. Your shout outs, sorry.
Well, first off, Thursday night I attended. I think it was the Grand Prix Travel Reddit with F1 NTO with our friend Dave, who we always go to Trinity Common with, and it was nice to catch up with him. Seeing everybody. About 50 people came out to the pub that Thursday night. Got to see people from Australia, people from the United States, people throughout Canada, and even some people from Toronto who we even see at Trinity Common. I met some people from Europe. It was pretty awesome to see like 50 people, all different ages, and just embracing Formula One. I obviously the gals on the grid, we've done some stuff with them at Honda Indy last year. We got to go see the Nicole Harvda event on Thursday night in Old Montreal. So we took a photo of that. As always, Kim Illman, always gracious to, spend some time with him and sign my book. My dad is going to really appreciate that. Um, and obviously Nicole Harvda, just spending time and just seeing her race in person. And you know, some friends want to say hello. The Dirty Side of the Track podcast, Brian and Rob. We had a fun night Sunday night, and we had a couple of casuals and just it's very. I think a lot of people, if they go to the Circuit de Villeneuve, they were sitting on turn one or turn two, and I'm in the hairpin. It's so hard to meet with somebody um, throughout the day, and it takes a long time to get to the track. So the fact that I was able to spend some time with Brian and Rob for a couple of hours Sunday night with no immediate anything else afterwards was just kind of nice. And just they're always welcomed on our podcast, and I know we're in some sort of discussions, so I'm just gonna leave it at there. But that was really good, and it was a good weekend. I think overall, I didn't have any major issues or drama. Everybody was very accessible, accepting in the stands, because everybody's there for one reason, is to watch Formula One. No matter the team, everybody is respectful, and you got everybody whose their passion is Formula One, and they're there to enjoy it. And I think that was like kind of the cool thing this year for me, is just getting to meet some people from Winnipeg, got to meet some people from North Carolina that were sitting next to me, and got to, have some honest conversations and just, some banter and here and there and little chirps here and there, but always respectful. It was a good weekend, and I think the weather played a major factor in that. And you can tell a little bit with the tan. Not too much burn. I was reapplying every hour, but yeah. Sorry for my rant there. I
Oh,
didn't mean
you
to go
look
talking.
nice and seasoned, put it that way.
Do a barrel roll.
Or I think that was really funny. Okay, so I gotta tell you something. I was like, I was thinking about content throughout the weekend. I'm like, okay, what can I do? And I don't know if that has to be a new thing, the walk and talk, but like I
I
was
love that, to be honest. That was so much fun. Little walk and talk to the track with Ricci and a little recap of the day. That was perfect,
I guess
man.
find me a park. I guess I'm gonna have to do another walk and talk. Yeah. No, we
I
need to get
love that.
we need to get back into those 60
Yes,
seconds.
exactly. Well, we'll do our next 60-second prediction next week when we talk about the Austrian Grand Prix. A lot of storylines going to go into that one. Now, considering that we've had some turmoil at McLaren, and now Mercedes looks good on a fast track. So will they be picking it up in Austria? Who knows? And also, shout out Kimi Antonelli, third
Yeah.
youngest podium winner in F1 history, but Max Verstappen and our own Lance Stroll. Some might say elite company that is he's been joining,
Yeah, and
overall.
I
Six overall, four World Drivers' Championships between Lance and Max. 65 or 66 race wins. between Lance and Max?
I would just say, like, I think that was also another special part of this weekend. It's like I've been going to the Grand Prix since 2022, and it was a different driver winner. I'm gonna be honest. Sorry, Tyler. But also, like, as an Italian, come from an Italian family, seeing Kimi Antonelli,
Yeah.
an Italian driver, get his first podium in F1 history, and so I obviously was yelling a lot of Italian words.
It's just fun that like Montreal has become a track like that. Lewis is Hamilton's first win. Kimi has like these young drivers getting their first win, their first podium, right? There, it's exciting. It's exciting for that. It's that, Canada is that track. Like Montreal is that track.
This is why this needs to stay on the grid.
Exactly. And it will until 2035.
Yeah.
That's
Still
awesome.
tired.
So everyone, thank you so much for listening to season 5, episode 13 of the F1 podcast. Again, this is Andrew. That was Jonathan. If you would like to follow us on all our social media pages, please go to our link tree where all our social media feeds will be there as well. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast. We'll be there. And we'll be back next week with our preview of the Austrian GP, where the Red Bull ring will be decked out in the orange. Will there be papaya? We don't know. See you soon. Take care.